The day one drone beat Russia's billion-dollar defense and destroyed their untouchable port. The fog hung thick over the Gulf of Finland as 15 Ukrainian drones raced toward their target at 6:15 local time. They had already flown 960 kilometers through hostile airspace. Their engines were running dangerously hot. Fuel gauges were dropping toward empty. But the mission was almost complete. Russia's largest Baltic port, Luga, lay just ahead. The Russians called it untouchable. Protected by layers of the most sophisticated air defense systems money could buy, everything seemed normal until a Russian patrol boat materialized through the morning fog directly below them. The formation leader suddenly jerked hard right as bright orange tracers erupted from the water surface. The patrol boat's 14.5mm machine gun was walking fire directly across their flight path. The rounds passed between two drones so close that if there had been pilots aboard, they would have felt the pressure waves through their cockpits. But these aircraft had no pilots. Just operators sitting in underground bunkers near Kiev, watching grainy satellite feeds on computer screens. 3 missiles launched from the patrol boat in rapid succession. Igles shoulder-fired missiles, designed for shooting down helicopters, were now being desperately fired at tiny shadows barely visible in the dawn light. The drone formation scattered like a flock of starlings avoiding a hawk. Some climbed toward the clouds. Others dove to wave height. The missiles tried to follow. One missile lost its lock completely, spiraling uselessly into the Baltic Sea. Another exploded harmlessly between targets, when its proximity fuse was triggered by empty air. The third missile found its mark. The trailing drone transformed into a brief fireball that scattered burning debris across the water's surface. 14 survivors regrouped and pressed forward toward Luga, now just 40 kilometers ahead. That's when Russia's most advanced air defense system lit them up, the S-400. Battery's gravestone radar had been tracking them silently for several minutes, but only now it revealed itself by switching from passive search mode to active targeting mode. These weren't simple commercial quadcopters modified for military use. These were UJ-26 Beaver drones, purpose-built weapons systems that could challenge even Russia's most advanced surface-to-air missiles and come out victorious. The Russian radar operator sitting in his climate-controlled command vehicle was about to learn why his trillion-ruble air defense system had learned to fear these $30,000 drones. As soon as the Beavers entered range, the S-400 began painting them with concentrated radar energy. The system works by shooting focused radar beams at 3 GHz frequency, then measuring how those signals bounce back from targets. Think of it like sonar used by submarines, except using radio waves instead of sound waves. The problem the Russians immediately discovered was that these Beaver drones were constructed almost entirely from fiberglass and carbon fiber composite materials that only reflect about 10% of radar energy compared to traditional metal aircraft. At 40 kilometers distance, they appeared smaller than seagulls on the operator's targeting screen. He couldn't achieve a solid weapons lock, so he tried something clever that Russian doctrine recommended for difficult targets. Track via missile. Fire first. Then use the missile's own onboard seeker to relay better targeting data back to the battery's fire control system. 2, 4, 8, and 6 DM missiles erupted from their vertical launchers in clouds of white smoke. Each missile cost $2 million and was specifically designed to destroy $100 million fighter jets at extreme range. But here's where the laws of physics became Ukraine's unexpected ally. The drones immediately executed emergency evasive maneuvers, diving to just 10 meters above the Baltic waves. The missiles attempted to follow, diving at 70-degree angles toward the water. But missile control surfaces work exactly like airplane wings. They need smooth airflow to generate steering forces. At such steep dive angles, those control fins aerodynamically stalled, losing all effectiveness. Both missiles tumbled uncontrolled into the sea, exploding harmlessly in towers of white water. The S-400 crew quickly switched tactics, launching 9 M96E2 missiles equipped with gas dynamic thrusters. These were different beasts entirely. Small rocket engines mounted around the missile body that fire sideways, allowing 90-degree turns even without any airflow over control surfaces. These advanced missiles could pull 60 Gs, turn on a dime, and chase targets all the way down to wave height. The lead Beaver tried desperately to evade, banking hard left at maximum G loading. But the missile's computer had already calculated the intercept point and adjusted its trajectory accordingly. 3 seconds to impact. 2 seconds. The warhead detonated in an expanding sphere, sending 200 tungsten fragments slicing through the air at supersonic velocity. The drone disintegrated instantly into carbon fiber confetti scattered across the sky. A second missile found another target moments later. But the debris cloud created an unexpected tactical problem for the Russian defenders. 13 radar returns suddenly became hundreds as wreckage scattered across multiple cubic kilometers of airspace. Effectively masking the surviving drones behind a cloud of false targets, the remaining 13 drones scattered like rabbits avoiding a hunting hawk. Some climbed for altitude. Some dove back toward the waves. Some broke left while others broke right. No predictable pattern. But Russian air defenders had encountered these exact tactics before during previous drone engagements. They had already positioned 4 Pantsir short-range air defense systems in overlapping fields of fire, creating what military planners call a box. No matter which direction the drones attempted to flee, they would inevitably enter someone's engagement zone. The Pantsir systems were specifically designed for exactly this type of threat. They combined long-range missiles for distant targets with rapid-fire cannons for close-in defense. Think of them as the goalkeeper in soccer. The absolute last line of defense when everything else has failed to stop the attack. Each Pantsir uses a fundamentally different engagement philosophy compared to the S-400 saturation firing. Instead of launching multiple missiles simultaneously and hoping for hits, Pantsir doctrine emphasizes shoot, look, shoot. Fire one missile, observe if it hits the target, make corrections based on results, then fire again. This methodology maximizes accuracy against highly maneuvering targets while conserving expensive ammunition. The first Pantsir system achieved weapons lock on multiple drones flying in loose formation and launched a 5.7E6 missile at the leader. The drones immediately executed what Ukrainian operators call a wagon wheel maneuver. They spiraled around a common center point while simultaneously maintaining forward momentum toward the target. Imagine riders on a carousel that's also moving forward through space. The constantly changing aspect angles completely confused the missile's proportional navigation system, which predicts interception points based on assumptions of consistent target motion. The Pantsir gunner switched to his twin-barrel 30mm automatic cannons capable of firing 5,000 rounds per minute. Instead of trying to track individual fast-moving drones, he created what artillerists call a beaten zone. He filled an entire cube of airspace with so much lead that anything passing through it would inevitably get hit by something. 4 drones entered this lethal zone of intersecting tracer fire. Only 2 emerged on the other side, damaged but still flying. The mathematical reality was brutal but simple. 9 drones remaining out of the original 15. Almost a dozen expensive Russian missiles expended. Hundreds of cannon rounds fired. And the attackers hadn't even reached the port facility yet. Meanwhile, warning lights were illuminating across command centers throughout Leningrad Oblast, showing similar desperate battles unfolding simultaneously at Kursk, Bryansk, and Rostov. 14 other drone groups were attacking different targets across western Russia at exactly the same moment. Every available air defense battery was fully engaged in combat. There would be no reinforcements coming. The Russian defenders at Luga were completely on their own. But the Ukrainian drones were equally isolated, cut off from support. The surviving drones pressed forward relentlessly toward their target, their operators knowing full well that the hardest part of the mission still lay ahead. The Krasuka 4 electronic warfare vehicle looked deceptively simple from the outside, like an ordinary shipping container mounted on a military truck chassis. But inside that innocuous-looking box was $20 million worth of sophisticated jamming equipment. As the 9 surviving drones approached Luga's industrial complex, the Krasuka system activated with full power, flooding the entire electromagnetic spectrum with carefully engineered interference. The system works by overwhelming specific radio frequencies with electronic noise. Imagine trying to have a normal phone conversation while someone stands next to you blasting white noise static through a powerful megaphone directly into your ear. That's essentially what electronic warfare does to radio communications. The Krasika swept rapidly from 1.2 to 5.8 gigahertz, hunting systematically for the control frequencies, linking these drones to their human operators 1,000 kilometers away in Ukraine. The Russian electronic warfare operators used a proven technique called sweep and dwell. Rapidly scan the entire spectrum to identify active signals. Then concentrate all available jamming power on those specific frequencies to maximum effect. Within seconds, they identified transmissions at 2.4 gigahertz. The Krasika immediately focused its 20 kilowatt beam, creating an impenetrable wall of electromagnetic noise on that frequency. But the Beaver drones weren't using simple point-to-point remote control like hobby aircraft. They were frequency hopping, jumping between 128 different channels per second in a pseudo-random pattern known only to the drone and its operator. Think of it like constantly changing phone numbers in the middle of an ongoing conversation, with only one person knowing the sequence in advance. In theory, frequency hopping should be mathematically impossible to jam effectively. But the Russians had one more technique they could attempt. The Russian operators countered with barrage jamming, flooding the entire usable spectrum regardless of any specific frequency. The concept in theory is elegantly simple. If you can't find the needle in the haystack, set the whole haystack on fire. This electronic assault should have completely severed the control link, leaving the drones helpless. But the Beavers kept flying their mission as if nothing had happened. They had seamlessly switched to fully autonomous mode, using terrain contour matching navigation. The system compared radar altimeter readings to preloaded topographic maps stored in onboard computers. Every hill, every building, every bridge, every landmark had been carefully mapped and programmed before the mission. The drones knew exactly where they were without requiring any external signals whatsoever. But autonomous navigation created its own unexpected problems. 3 drones flew directly into a construction crane that simply hadn't existed when their navigation maps were originally programmed 6 months earlier. The massive metal tower appeared suddenly through gaps in the fog, far too late to avoid. The impacts were instantaneous and catastrophic. Carbon fiber composite versus structural steel never ends well for the drone. The wreckage tumbled to the ground in flaming pieces. 6 survivors continued pressing toward the target, but their battery indicators now showed 18% remaining charge. The calculations became critically important. They had enough power remaining to reach the target zone, but absolutely none left for evasive maneuvers during the final approach. They would get exactly 1 shot at this mission. No second chances. Meanwhile, the S-400 battery commander was facing an impossible decision that perfectly illustrated the economic absurdity of this new kind of warfare. His remaining missiles cost $2 million each. They were designed and optimized to destroy aircraft worth 100 times that amount. The drones currently attacking his sector cost $35,000 each to manufacture. Even if he successfully destroyed every single attacking drone, Russia would still lose financially. This wasn't traditional warfare anymore. This was economics conducted with high explosives. The frustrated commander ordered his men to switch. Zu-23 anti-aircraft guns. These twin-barrel 23mm cannons dated all the way back to the 1960s. But the ammunition cost only $3 per round. And besides, getting hit by a $3 bullet has exactly the same effect as getting hit by a $2 million missile. Dead is dead regardless of cost. The problem was that these ancient guns required optical targeting. Someone had to physically see the target with their own eyes to shoot at it. No fancy radar guidance. The drones were flying at 150 kilometers per hour while executing random barrel rolls every 2 to 4 seconds. The targeting computer needed at least 3 seconds of steady, predictable flight to calculate an accurate firing solution. It never got those 3 seconds. The frustrated gunners resorted to World War II tactics, filling the sky with walls of tracer fire and simply hoping something would connect with a target. One incredibly lucky burst caught a drone mid-roll, high-velocity rounds tearing through its fiberglass fuselage. The drone tumbled from the sky trailing smoke. 5 drones remaining. Luga port was now just 8 kilometers ahead, But here's something critical about real combat that training simulations never quite capture. Sometimes man-made weapons aren't the only threats you need to worry about. Nature itself can become your enemy. As the drones closed with the port facility, rising air temperatures caused the fog that had been hanging low near the water's surface to start lifting. The same fog that had concealed them from visual detection earlier now returned with a vengeance. Within minutes, it transformed the entire battlefield into a ghostly maze where million-dollar sensor systems became effectively worthless. The fog cut visibility to barely 30 meters. The Russians couldn't see the drones. The drones couldn't see the port. Everyone was flying and fighting completely blind now. The Pantsir's thermal imaging system, specifically designed to detect aircraft heat signatures through smoke and darkness, could normally spot targets at 5 kilometers distance. But fog scatters infrared radiation just like it scatters visible light. Detection range collapsed to barely 200 meters. The defenders switched to desperate area saturation tactics. Firing blind at the logical approaches they calculated the drones must use based on known positions. They were creating walls of lead at specific GPS coordinates, betting that the drones would fly directly through those killing zones. 5. Ukrainian drones descended to just 3 meters above the Baltic waters. Their radar altimeters pinging constantly to avoid crashing into the wavetops. Salt spray coated their camera lenses, turning any video feed into completely useless blur. The operators back in Ukraine, watching through satellite data links, saw only gray static on their screens. They were flying purely on GPS coordinates now, trusting mathematics to guide them through the murky skies toward Luga's gas processing complex. Frustrated by their complete lack of hits, the Russian defenders activated their GPS spoofing system, broadcasting false position signals from powerful ground transmitters. This technique works by overwhelming the weak signals coming from actual satellites with much stronger fake signals, making GPS receivers think they're somewhere completely different. Imagine your car's navigation suddenly insisting you're driving through a different city, entirely. 2 drones blindly, following the spoofed coordinates, banked hard right and flew directly into the water at high speed. The impacts were invisible in the thick fog. Just brief radar returns that suddenly vanished from tracking screens. 3 drones remained in the fight. Their backup inertial navigation systems kept them on correct course despite the GPS deception. Port security forces armed with Igla-S, shoulder-fired missiles waited tensely on rooftops and observation towers. The Igla's infrared seeker uses a nitrogen-cooled detector that sees heat at wavelengths between 3 and 5 microns. Human eyes see light at 4 to 700 nanometers. The Igla sees much deeper into infrared spectrum, capable of detecting temperature differences as small as half a degree Celsius. But the Beaver's tiny 20-horsepower engine ran only 40 degrees above ambient air temperature. Against the warm Baltic fog, it was nearly thermally invisible. The security troops fired ambush shots, waiting until they heard drone engines pass overhead, then shooting from behind where exhaust heat signatures were strongest. One missile found its mark through sheer luck. The proximity fuse detonated 5 meters from a drone. Metal shrapnel tore through composite skin and severed control cables. The crippled drone spiraled down into a petroleum storage tank farm, exploding harmlessly between empty tanks. 2 survivors pressed forward through the industrial maze, weaving between 40-meter-tall storage tanks. An May-8 military helicopter thundered overhead, door gunners firing PKM machine guns at shadows and sounds in the fog. The helicopter pilot attempted using rotor downwash to physically blow drones into obstacles. 60-kilometer-per-hour winds that could slam fragile aircraft into concrete tank walls. But the powerful downwash also cleared temporary patches in the fog, briefly improving the drone cameras. For those few precious moments, the operators could actually see their target. The massive cryogenic gas processing complex loomed ahead. The facility's automatic safety systems detected unauthorized aircraft approaching the restricted zone. Threat assessment algorithms, normally designed to prevent accidental airplane collisions, triggered emergency protocols. Warning sirens wailed across the entire complex. Emergency venting procedures began automatically, releasing thousands of cubic meters of methane and ethane to prevent catastrophic overpressure if the storage tanks were breached. The invisible cloud of highly flammable gas expanded rapidly across the facility, waiting for any spark to transform it into a massive fuel-air explosive device. The defenders had inadvertently created absolutely perfect conditions for maximum destruction. Water cannon trucks raced to calculated intercept points, their operators attempting to knock drones from the sky with high-pressure streams. These weren't garden hoses but industrial firefighting equipment, capable of punching through wooden walls at 50 meters distance. One drone flew directly into a water column. The immense pressure snapped its propeller like a dry twig. It tumbled onto concrete pavement, warhead intact but completely harmless. The final Beaver adjusted its course as its thermal camera finally locked onto the unmistakable heat signature of the cryogenic processor. Minus 163 degrees Celsius, far colder than anything else at the port. The operator switched to manual control via Iridium satellite link, accepting the 2-second communications delay. That made precise flying nearly impossible at this range. The drone had 12% battery life remaining, enough for maybe 90 seconds of powered flight. It traced a weaving path through the 3-dimensional maze of pipes and processing towers, each turn burning precious power. Security forces fired rifles and shotguns at the sound of its motor. Bullets sparked off metal infrastructure all around it. One lucky pellet cluster shattered the camera lens, leaving the operator flying on last known position and dead reckoning alone. 10 seconds to impact. 5 seconds. The battery indicator hit critical red warning. Motors beginning to lose power. But momentum would carry it the final distance. The last Beaver drone struggled through the refineries. Complex 3-dimensional maze of interconnected pipes, vertical towers, and metal catwalks. Its civilian-grade GPS receiver, normally accurate to 5 meters on a good day, now showed position errors of 30 meters due to multipath interference. Radio signals bouncing off countless metal structures created false readings. The GPS spoofing was getting progressively stronger as well. The operator in Ukraine, watching through a 2-kilobit Iridium satellite connection, saw only the most basic telemetry data. Altitude 3 meters. Speed 40 kilometers per hour. Battery 8%. Target bearing 285 degrees. No video feed. No radar picture. Just numbers updating every 2 seconds as the drone flew blindly toward its programmed coordinates. The 2-second control lag made precision maneuvering completely impossible. When the operator commanded left turn, the drone had already traveled 20 meters before receiving that signal. He was forced to fly by prediction, constantly imagining where the drone would be in the future, not where it currently was. Like playing a video game where the screen shows what happened 2 seconds ago. Through occasional breaks in the static, he caught fragmentary glimpses from the failing camera. A massive cylindrical tower. Pipes wrapped in reflective silver insulation. Warning signs in Cyrillic script. The cryogenic fractionation unit. The absolute heart of the complex where raw gas condensate was separated into valuable commercial components. Security teams deployed their absolute last-ditch defense. Additional water cannons mounted on rapid response trucks. One cannon operator tracked the drone by sound alone, leading the target like a hunter shooting clay pigeons. The high-pressure water jet caught the Beaver's tail section, spinning it violently sideways. The drone's gyroscope fought desperately to stabilize the aircraft. Motors screaming at maximum power, draining the last energy reserves. Battery warning flashing 5%. The operator knew with absolute certainty he had exactly 1 chance remaining. He pushed the control stick forward, converting altitude into airspeed, diving toward the base of the target structure. The emergency venting had created an invisible cloud of methane mixed with ethane and propane. A chemically perfect fuel mixture suspended in air, waiting for ignition. The drone's 20-kilogram warhead contained thermite-enhanced charges. Aluminum powder and iron oxide that burns at 2,500 degrees Celsius. Thermite cannot be extinguished with water or foam. Once the reaction starts, it burns relentlessly until all fuel is completely consumed. Hot enough to melt through structural steel in seconds, the warhead was configured for impact detonation. A simple mechanical trigger requiring no electronics whatsoever. 3 seconds to impact. The battery died completely and without warning. Motor stopping instantly. But physics took control now. 40 kilograms of drone traveling at 15 meters per second carries substantial kinetic momentum. It glided the final 50 meters in eerie silence. A ballistic projectile following Newton's immutable laws of motion. Security forces held their collective breath, desperately hoping it would miss, fall short, or hit something non-critical. The drone struck the fractionation column's base exactly where the operator had aimed. Metal crumpled against steel with a sickening metallic crunch. For one heartbeat, absolutely nothing happened. Then the thermite ignited with blinding intensity. The initial explosion was relatively small. Just a white-hot flare that burned through the column's steel wall in under 2 seconds. Superheated molten metal sprayed into the pressurized vessel, instantly vaporizing liquid hydrocarbons inside. The pressure spike ruptured adjacent pipes, releasing even more flammable gas into the air. Then the entire vented cloud ignited in one catastrophic moment. The fuel-air explosion expanded at 3,000 meters per second. A crushing overpressure wave that shattered every window within a kilometer radius. The fireball rose 200 meters into the morning sky, brilliant orange against the gray fog. Visible for dozens of kilometers. But this was merely the beginning of the destruction. The facility suffered what engineers call a bleave, boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion. When pressurized liquid gas suddenly depressurizes, it expands 600 times in volume almost instantaneously, creating devastating explosive force. Each ruptured vessel caused adjacent vessels to catastrophically fail. A domino cascade of destruction that consumed the entire processing complex within minutes. The $2 billion cryogenic processor, designed to withstand earthquakes and severe storms, collapsed into twisted scrap metal. The fire would burn continuously for 6 days, clearly visible on satellite imagery from the Estonian border. A pillar of black smoke marking Ukraine's deepest successful strike into Russian territory yet. One drone. $35,000. $2 billion of critical infrastructure destroyed. The economic equation of modern warfare had been permanently rewritten.